2016. I've just started grade 3. An innocent young man unaware of the pure evil that I would be exposed to in just a couple of months' time. It would destroy my mind, my relationships, and even my self-respect in the years to come, but I'll get to that in a minute. This story kicks off in March of the same year. I'm sitting with my best mate Donnie at break, and we're chatting about the girls on TV that we find attractive. At which point he asks me a question that I don't quite understand. He says to me, "Luke, have you ever watched porn before?" Now, of course, being only 9 years old, I ask him what exactly that means. I say to him, what's porn? And the explanation he gives me is pretty much girls. So straight away hearing this, being the young boy that I was, I get super excited and I say to him, well, what would I have to search up to find that, right? And he tells me literally just look up ladies and you'll get hundreds, if not thousands of photos to look at. So later that afternoon, I get off the bus, my mum picks my brothers and I up, drives us home. I proceed to go into the bathroom and lock the door behind me, at which point I put this search in and I spend the next 10 to 15 minutes scrolling through hundreds of photos that no child should ever see. So over the next couple of weeks, I'd do this 3 or 4 times a week religiously. I'd get off the bus, I'd come home, go into the bathroom, and spend a few minutes just scrolling through these photos on my phone. Now, of course, it goes without saying, but I wasn't squeezing the hot glue gun at this point. I was just a young man with far too much curiosity for my own good, and I took great pleasure in just looking at the photos. And without even realizing it, porn would slowly take over my mind until it had eventually taken over my life. After a few weeks of watching this, I had no shame in talking openly to my best mate Donnie about this at school. He took great pride in talking to me about when he would do it. So that began to form the belief in my mind that it was normal, that it wasn't a problem to be looking at it, especially this young. And so I started to see it as just a thing that everyone did. Given that Donnie was my only friend, whatever he did I found to be normal, and so I emulated his actions. So over the next few weeks I continued looking at these pictures, and it doesn't take long until I realized that if I click on the links underneath them, I would be taken to a website where these pictures became videos. And this opened up a whole new door for me. Now, whilst all of this was going on, I was doing my best to keep it super private, super secretive, because not only did I not want my parents knowing, because I knew how much shit I would be in, I didn't even want my brothers knowing, because I was embarrassed, just because I thought it was like an embarrassing thing, right? Fast forward to one Friday night in mid-September. I'm laying on my bed in my room playing that game, I think it's called Cookin' Fever on my phone, when my middle brother, who would have been about 11 years old at the time, comes into my room and asks me what I'm doing. So I tell him, I'm just playing Cookin' Fever. And that's when he walks up to me, right? And he yanks my iPod out of my hand and runs out of the room. So I call out to him, bring it back, like I'm getting angry at him. And I chase after him. He's run off to my eldest brother's room with the iPod in his hand whilst it's still logged in, right? So I get to my eldest brother's room. He was 13 years old at the time. And they're looking at my phone laughing. And it's at this point that my middle brother, who was 11 years old, says, "Luke, you've been watching porn," and they're sitting there laughing at me, and obviously super embarrassed. I say, "No, I haven't been doing that. I'm just denying it, right?" But little did I realize, this entire time, I'd been leaving a trail behind with every search I would make, because I didn't know private browsing or search history was a thing. So every time I would search something, it was in a public browser, is that what you'd call it? And all of my tabs would have a search history behind them. So everything I had watched in the past couple of months was showing up on the iPod search history, right? So although I'm super embarrassed, I wasn't too worried, because I knew my brothers weren't going to tell my parents. They just found it funny as fuck. And being a similar age, they were probably watching it already as well. But fast forward to a cold afternoon in July of 2018. I'm sitting under the footy shed near school talking to my best mate Crocker about the girls that we like, right? The girls in our class who we were attracted to. And somehow I segue the conversation into the question of, has Crocker ever watched porn before? And I say to him, have you ever watched porn before? Of course, he tells me no. He sort of wants me to explain exactly what it is, because he's heard adults talk about it. He's heard about it in TV shows, movies that he's watched on TV, but he doesn't quite understand what it is. Now, of course, by this point, I'd been watching it for, nearly 2 years, so I felt like it was an absolute privilege to be the one to show him. I tell him to sit down, and we spend the next half an hour sitting on this footy bench near school, watching porno after porno. Now, this may sound funny to some of you, But I had just unlocked a door in this kid's mind that would then lead to the exact same issues that I faced years later for him. Crocker's sitting there looking at my phone, absolutely mesmerized. He cannot believe what he's seeing. The things he's witnessing, he didn't even know existed 5 minutes before. Now, just recently, Crocker admitted to me that afternoon, he actually went home and spent the next couple of hours watching this stuff on his phone. And similar to me, it wasn't something he was watching because he actually had any sort of capabilities yet. It was purely just for the stimulus, the entertainment of it. But it gets to December of 2018. And by this point, I've been watching it probably 200 out of 365 days, right? So 200 days a year, which probably doesn't sound crazy to some of you. But what you've got to keep in mind is that I hadn't even reached puberty yet, right? So it's purely dopamine guiding this decision, which meant when my hormones hit, I was in for a rude shock, and that I was. And on December 26th, that day came. It's Boxing Day, and I'm staying the night at my nan's house. I'm laying in bed watching some YouTube videos, when I finally decide to put my phone down. I lay there for the next 30, 40 minutes, but I just can't seem to get to sleep. And it's not for the usual reasons. It's because I have the fattest woody that I've ever had in my entire life. Now, usually when I'd get these, they'd go away fairly quick, but this one wasn't. It was persisting. So instinctively, I get out of bed, walk down the hallway with my phone in hand, go into the bathroom and lock the door behind me. I then proceed to get up Pornhub on my phone and spend the next 30 seconds, well, you know. After this 30 seconds had passed, I get this indescribable, unmatched state of euphoria rush throughout my entire body. I had never experienced a feeling like this before. Little did I realize it at the time. I had just unlocked the door to what was ultimately going to be my demise, and a vice which would have me in a chokehold for the years to come. No amount of drugs, sex or alcohol would ever come close to the exact state of euphoria that I felt in this very moment. So 2019 rolls around, I make a few new friends at school, and it just so happens that these friends had had the exact experience in the school holidays that I had also had, and they had started watching pornography as well. And so I started to think it was extremely normal because I saw most of the lads my age, 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, watching it. And so I developed the belief in my mind that it was a perfectly normal thing for young boys to be doing at my age. As the year went on, I kept watching it. I didn't really see an issue with it. It didn't seem to have any impact on other areas of my life. I hadn't impacted my relationships yet. I was still perfectly fine at talking to girls, and I was still a super confident kid. But it gets to December of the same year, and by this point, I've been watching it pretty much every single day. There wouldn't have been a single day that year where I went without. And I had gotten so bad without even realizing it that I would sometimes take toilet breaks at school to, and once again, I didn't see that to be an issue at the time. It's, I'm a 12-year-old boy with heaps of testosterone rushing through me. This is my thought process. So I get into high school the following year, right, 2020. And at this point, the lockdowns hit, which means I'm sitting at home every single day, waking up at 12, grinding out Fortnite, watching porn in between every single game. This is where shit really ramps up. I was watching it at the absolute peak, probably 3, 4, maybe even 5 times a day. And I remember I went through this period where, I've never spoken about this before, as soon as I would finish, I would cry, right? It sounds so whack, right? I don't understand it now. But I remember this was a thing that I had at the time. And to me, what that signals is a complete depletion of dopamine, right? I was just doing it so much that it got to the point where as soon as I'd finish, my dopamine had been depleted so much that I would literally just cry. And that's embarrassing to say 100%, bro. I'm not embarrassed now, but it is a real thing that happens to young men. And there was no question at this point in time as to whether or not it was normal, because as far as I was concerned, every single that I knew was doing it. Literally, I did not know a single male who wasn't watching porn. So it had become so ingrained in my brain that it was a societal norm, that it was actually weird if you didn't watch it. A couple months into the year, I start to have a few little flings. I'm talking to a few girls at school. They don't really work out. But my main priority becomes very much focused on chasing girls, losing my V card, being the most popular amongst the girls in my year or even in the grade above. And I remember around early March, I start talking to this girl who, for the sake of this story, we'll call Jane. which had recently lost her V card. So to me, in my mind at the time, that meant the things that I'd been watching on my phone all of these years were finally about to become my reality. Jane and I organised to have a sleepover at our mutual friend Lara's house the following weekend. Of course, my parents didn't know. I told them I was staying at my mate's house. So I arrived to Lara's house on the Friday night, and I spent the next couple of hours with Lara and Jane just chatting shit, you know, getting to know Jane. But I would say no more than 3 hours being there, I get some terrible news. Jane has just gotten her, which of course, if you can put two and two together, you know what that means. It wasn't going to happen for me on this particular night. Now, despite feeling some chemistry with Jane, later on that week, I end up cutting it off with her because my mind had become so geared towards instant gratification that my mindset was quite literally, if the girl that I'm dating doesn't want to, you know, go there as soon as I've started dating, regardless of the circumstances, that I should just go and find a new girl. Yeah, fucked up, I know. But this is seriously the way that watching so much Korn and all of these societal norms had made me start to think. Oh, that's beautiful. I'd almost taken away the human aspect of them and had turned them into a complete object. It's like that old thing of objectification, like women say, you're objectifying me, but it is a real thing, it seriously is. Guys develop this thing in their brain where they view women as sex objects and they no longer view them as human beings. That's quite literally what they are. But this wasn't even close to the magnitude of damage that Korn would do to my brain in the years to come. Fast forward to March of 2021. As most of you will know, I start dating this girl named Sarah. And without even realizing it at the time, over the next 2 years, the relationship we would build together would become contaminated with lust, condemnation, and hatred towards one another. So a couple months into dating Sarah, I begin to become super frustrated that we haven't, you know, done anything yet. Because like I said just a minute ago, I had this mindset of if she wasn't willing to go there, then she wasn't my girl. And this created tension in the relationship, right? Where there was minor bickering, disagreements about what we should and shouldn't do. And I feel we become very closed off from each other. We weren't willing to show our true, authentic selves because we were afraid of what the other might think, you know? She was afraid of what I might think because of my very harsh judgments towards what she did and didn't want to do. And I was afraid of what she may or may not think of me for wanting to do those things. So it created this real sense of tension. But fast forward to August. Australia is put into lockdown and Sarah and I are just sitting at home on FaceTime every single day, bored out of our minds. So one day whilst we're sitting there talking, we agree to send some photos to each other, which is something I had never done before and would be a decision which I would come to regret massively just a few months later, but I'll get to that in a minute. And after this, naturally, my lust grew even stronger because I had put her even higher up on the pedestal given what I had just seen, right? So because of this, I start watching Korn even more. It got so bad that throughout the lockdowns, I was watching it probably 5 or 6 times a day. But anyhow, school goes back in September and Sarah and I both agree with each other that we're finally gonna lose our V cards. So I won't go into detail, but we end up doing it and that's it. I finally have achieved my goal that I've been striving for every single day for the past 2 years. And I was genuinely happy for a very, very short period of time after having done this, right? But of course, given what you've heard already, you know what's about to happen next. My lust only grows stronger. Given that I'm not together with Sarah all the time, anytime that I'm not with her and I have a lustful urge, I start to watch porn more and more and more. Even on a school day, I'd watch it 3 or 4 times a day. First thing in the morning, right before bed, a few times after school. It literally had control of me in my relationship without me realizing it. And in just a few months' time, things would start to turn ugly fast. But before I get to that, I must tell you by this point, Crocker had also become chronically addicted, which he admitted to me not long ago as well. And that all stemmed from that one day that I showed him back when we were 11 years old. He'd skip gym sessions to watch Korn. He wouldn't go to school for days so he could sit at home watching Korn, binging Netflix. It had control over him just as much as it did me. But a couple months go by, we get into the new year, so 2022, And by this point, given that I've been watching Korn for around, 4 years, I had begun to indulge in a few of the more niche topics, which tend to be a lot more unrealistic. And because of this, I start asking my girlfriend if we can, experiment. And of course she says no, logically, but this makes me start to resent her, okay? Because I thought in a relationship you're supposed to, try out new things with your partner, but she's just said no. So this makes everything feel very closed off, and that sense of tension actually returned again. So a couple months into 2022, because of this resentment and tension that was brewing in the air between us, we started to fight like crazy. It was always over petty shit. And because I'd been watching so much Korn, my emotional response became very ingrained in my brain. I'd always get so angry and emotionally fueled in my arguments, right? I'd yell and I'd throw things out of proportion. And it's only now, looking back introspectively, that I can see how fucked in the head I actually was. Some of the things that I said, like I can look back on old texts and things that I said to Sarah back then, and it's no wonder the relationship ended the way that it did and went the way that it did. But bro, if you can't control your lust, then you literally have control over nothing in your life, because lust is man's strongest desire. Second to that is food, because these two things are the two main things that evolve the human species, right? Sex is repopulation, food keeps that population alive. Therefore, they release the most dopamine, and that's the thing we're drawn to seek out. And bro, there is no place in a relationship for masculine emotion and masculine anger towards a woman. You need to understand there is such a thing as feminine and masculine energy, and they're not the same. Let the woman be the emotional one. You are supposed to be the one who's stoic, if you will. You're the one that's supposed to regulate your emotions. You're not supposed to act on every single emotion you feel. This is literally why we end up with so many school people who are fucked in their heads, people, all these people that want to be something they're not, all these people that are so fucked up in their head and confused with themselves that they want to try and put a label on themselves or inflict harm onto other people. It's because they can't control their own emotions, and it all starts with being able to channel your own lust. But I remember towards the end of our relationship, it got to a point where we would literally, and then I would just turn the TV on straight after and pretend she didn't exist. And of course she noticed this straight away, she wanted to feel loved, she wanted to, hug or whatever afterwards. And I would just completely ignore her. She felt very neglected, and she felt like the only reason I was actually staying with her was for my own selfish, greedy, lustful desires, which I suppose was fairly true in a sense. Fast forward to August, I end up breaking up with Sarah, which once again, as the story goes, further amplifies my desire for lust, because now I've no longer got the, human connection in my life. So that addiction really ramps up. I'm talking 5 or 6 times a day. I couldn't even control myself at school. I'd put my hand up to go to the bathroom, go to the disabled toilets and one out. It literally had me in a chokehold. It led to more addiction in other areas of my life. But it gets to January 2023, and I find that these photos that I'd mentioned earlier had been shared with a few of the lads who I actually used to be mates with at school. Now, I wasn't too stressed. I didn't feel too panicked at this point in time because it had been a while since I'd actually sent them. But I did sort of feel violated in the respect that people had seen that who I didn't want seeing that. And I honestly have no one else to blame but myself, bro, because it's me who put myself in that position. It's me who chose to lead by lust. Literally every single decision I made as a teenager was led by lust and dopamine, the urge to want to go and do things. I would act off of my emotion. Everything I've told you not to do in this video, every bad decision I've told you, is literally how I lived my life until I was around 15 years old. The 3 biggest things, which I'll tell any young man straight out, that are gonna hold you back and stop you from achieving your goals: drugs, alcohol, and lust. And those are the 3 things that fueled every single terrible decision I ever made in my teenage years. And of course, most of you will know, the decision which finally woke me up was fueled by drugs and alcohol. I beat a man half to death and got in an 18-month-long court case which set me back $10,000 because I just couldn't control my emotions. And it all stemmed from one thing: lust. If you can't control your lust, it will control you in every single aspect of your life, every decision you make. My mindset, my work ethic, my relationships, my friendships, all destroyed because of one emotion, one chemical in my brain. And funnily enough, at the moment, I'm actually reading the book Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, which literally states in it, if a man can channel his lustful energy into something which is purposeful in life, he will reap great rewards. And bro, I just want you to remember that the strongest man in the Bible, Solomon, was defeated by lust. Do not let this take control of your mind like it has literally our whole generation. It's finally time for you to take back control of your fucking life. I hope you found value in this video. I really do hope it helped. This is something I'm so passionate about because I think it's not a topic that's talked about enough amongst young men. But with all that said, I'll see you in the next one. Hit the sub button, smash like, stay grinding, my G.